Welcome to our special city council meeting. My name is Paul Doring. I'm the vice mayor of the city. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Even though it's not on the agenda, I'm a little old school, so we'll do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we do our roll call, I have a little bit of scripting here to talk about Jeff being away. So I've been told by our city clerk that I'm supposed to read something, and I will. Prior to the roll call, I would like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted pursuant to California Government Code Section 54953, subsection B, concerning teleconferencing of meetings. Mayor Jeff Ellsworth is in Genoa, Nevada, and will be participating by speakerphone. In accordance with the Ralph M. Brown Act, this location has been identified in the notice and agenda for this meeting and posted at his location. ¿Qué más? Anything else? No. Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. You know, before we move forward, it occurs to me that, you know, our nation is suffering right now. We've had 3 mass shootings, one in Dayton, Ohio, one in El Paso, one in Gilroy. And, you know, even though we're not there, we're all Americans, we're all touched by violence and these acts. So I would like to just take a moment of silence and let us just think about that and reflect upon that. Okay, thank you. So we have one large item on our agenda, and it's broken down into several parts. I want to announce with respect to public comment, it's a little bit different with special meetings, so I'll read what it says here. Under California law, public comments at special meetings are limited to subjects on the agenda only. Therefore, public comment will take place during consideration of the item. Each person's comment shall be limited to 4 minutes. So moving to section 4.1, we have quite a bit to talk about. Hopefully we can move through it fairly quickly. The subject matter for our discussion today is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution acknowledging and supporting the city manager's recommendation of a reorganization of personnel positions, roles, and responsibilities within Public Works, authorizing the addition of 1 1/2 full-time equivalent positions to the Public Works Department, and to include 1 full-time equivalent trees and park superintendent and 1/2 full-time equivalent trees and parks maintenance worker position. Authorizing the reclassification of 1 maintenance worker position to a...
We're going to do roll call after he's done.
Okay. I see. Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed that, but I will do that. I apologize. Authorizing a budget increase of $147,895 to the general fund for the trees and parks superintendent position. And then we're going to have discussion about the city manager's recommendation to transition to bi-monthly billing, and discussion and direction to the city manager regarding a recommendation to revise the municipal code to increase purchase order limits. And you are right, we should do a roll call.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Here.
Councilmember Chateau?
Here.
Councilmember Knudsen is absent, and Councilmember Koberstein?
Here.
Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit. Mr. City Manager, can you introduce this item and get us started?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, so in brief, it's been 2 years since I arrived at the city, celebrated my 2-year anniversary last week. And if you'll recall, last year and the year before, we took a hard look at the fire department. We had a workshop similar to this, essentially adjusted the department a little bit, and then came back a year later, did a few more adjustments. And so this is really the second department that we've taken a hard deep dive on and looked at ways that we can improve the organization. So today we're going to share with you some recommendations. The real guiding objectives that drove these recommendations relate to our interest in improving the department's efficiency, increasing accountability for the operations within the department. We want to improve our focus on parks, streets, and buildings in particular. We know that we have a number of deferred assets that are in need of repair, that are in the process of, in some cases, replacement, in other cases, rehabilitation, along with other assets. And we certainly don't want to improve these, rehabilitate these structures or rebuild them without having a plan to take care of them. So that's a guiding philosophy. And we know that for the past 2 years, our city engineer, our only licensed city engineer, also has the responsibility of running the largest department. And so another part of our objective is to free up staff time for our city engineer, because we know we have a lot of capital projects in the works today, and we have a number of capital projects coming over the next several years. So the format of today's presentation will be broken down into 4 pieces. First, we want to talk to you about the organizational chart. Then we will move into a discussion of a service level matrix. We will then discuss the utility billing cycle and its impact on the city operations, along with our purchasing policy recommendations. So at this time, I want to invite our Public Works Director / City Engineer just to provide a brief overview of the department and introduction to the department, and then we'll come back to the organizational chart.
Good evening. I'd like to first introduce the staff members that are here tonight. I have Carlos Uribe, who's the Public Works Maintenance Manager. I have Glenn Price, the Public Works Superintendent, and I have Clayton Church, the Water Distribution Chief, and he's also acting Utility Operations Manager. I also have David Cuffman, who's also one of our maintenance worker twos that's under water distribution at this time. As many of you know, if you see the organizational chart, mine's still not loading. The current chart is a little lopsided. You know, typical, the last 2 agencies I worked, they're usually a flat line. You have divisions of either stormwater, water, sewer. They're all broken out, and then they report usually to an operations manager or an assistant director or deputy director of that division. And it's been kind of awkward, I want to say, the last couple of years, you know, seeing our staff members running from project to project without organization as far as the schedule, because they're putting out. Since it was changed right before my coming on board, there was actually 2 more field staff, and 1 retired, 1 got moved up, so they never replaced those 2 in the field. And so we've been kind of working on trying to save on funding. That, if everyone recalls, a 3 years ago, we had to pay back $1.9 million in general funds. We were hurting. This is prior to Measure D being passed, Measure T coming online. Okay. Sorry about that. But we're now at a better place where we could start getting out of this recession phase era of organization and back to where we need to be to start bringing our facilities back online and being organized and scheduled. And the matrix you see behind you is just 3 divisions, or actually 2 divisions. One behind Councilmember Chateau is the Department of Streets. And then you have the 2 behind Vice Mayor Doring and Councilmember Koberstein is Parks and Lands and Open Space. That's one big division that we currently only have 4, really 3 that are aligned, and then 1 who's actually the Public Works Maintenance Manager, who's kind of overseeing the streets, distribution of water, and parks and open space. And he's also our certified tree arborist, Carlos. So you got a lot of, this is just the 2 divisions right here, and then you have the whole packet in front of you with all the other divisions in the department. And when there's a crisis, everyone pulls in from all the divisions, except for maybe the plant operators. Everyone comes in and works together to get the work done. And what you see, like at the flagpole that we installed recently at City Hall, you had distribution staff coming in and helping streets and park staff to get that implemented, because you have folks that are more used to doing the underground work, such as digging a 4 and 5 foot foundation, and then you have the street surface folks. So going back to this new proposed system would be very more efficient of our time and free up staff so they can be more organized and scheduled in their work. Is that brief enough? Or?
That's it. That's very helpful.
Okay.
So our next slide is an overview of the current org chart. And I think the city engineer is correct in assessing that this is really a recession era organizational chart. It does reflect the fact that there were some cutbacks made due to the recession. This happened in a lot of different cities. We're not different, but positions were consolidated, and when people left, positions weren't filled and restored. And essentially, and I've talked to a number of people about this, I came to realize that we have, after seeing the organization perform for a couple of years now, realized that we have essentially a kitchen sink division, which is almost everything, and then water distribution. That's really what we have today. And what we're hoping to do through this reorg is create more accountability and focus for our parks, again, our streets and buildings. But if you see under Glenn Price, those 6 positions, that's essentially the kitchen sink division. And Clayton on the left, those positions there are entirely focused on water. And of course we do know that they do bleed into other areas, and some of their time is charged to the general fund. But that is essentially our field operation. And then you see the plants on the right. And we did until Felix left, until recently, we didn't have a chief on the wastewater side, and now we do. So the next chart is a chart that the objective here is to move the field operations under a single leader within the department and take those operational responsibilities and supervisory duties off of the city engineer. And so under that vacant Public Works Operations Manager position, we would have 3 divisions. We would have a Trees, Parks, Open Space division, a Streets and Buildings division of 3, and then a Water Distribution division that has expanded into full underground utilities that would include, with 1 additional person, would include storm drain and sewer. And so anything underground would be the division under Clayton. And then internally, we're recommending that we conduct an internal recruitment for the vacant operations manager position. That would be the converted position from the utilities operations position. And our public works maintenance manager position, Carlos, would report to that person and also serve as a liaison to each of the 3 superintendents. And we'll talk to you more about some of the service level issues, because there's a lot of work to do in that space, and it's going to hover between those 5 positions. The next tree is essentially our water and wastewater operation, and so that is an operation that's essentially intact today, not really adjusted as part of this reorg. We know that on the right side of that chart, we have a vacancy that occurred this past week. This past Friday, the position Senior Management Analyst became vacant. And at this point in time, while we're recommending a new Parks and Rec superintendent to lead the Parks and Rec effort, which would be an extra body in the field, and I'm sorry I overlooked, and as well as a designated lead among one of the 3 positions, and we would conduct an open recruitment, internal and external, for that superintendent position of parks, and then an internal recruitment for a lead position within that division to give it that focus. But on the newly vacant, as this was being crafted, the senior management analyst announced he was departing. And so at this point in time, we'd like to sleep on the idea of what to do with that position, because we're not sure. It may be that we need additional engineering capacity. We may need more people in the field. We may believe that we need assistance with construction management or project management through a consultant. And it may be a combination of all of that. And so we'd like to park that and see the impact of some of the changes here and just think through where is the greatest need within the department. So at this point in time, we'll think about that one, but it's not part of a recommendation at this point in time. It would just be a vacant position, offsetting the costs of the new park superintendent, but we're hoping not to wait too long before we come back with recommendations for that if we're planning to change it at all.
I have a question about this. I'm not real good at reading charts, but it looks to me that when you get over to the water side, those people are reporting to Erica. Isn't that vacant person, like, don't they report to the new person who's coming in as the chief of operations? Or do they still?
Not under this current model,
Okay.
partly because of Erica's expertise in engineering, and that's really what's driving that.
Okay.
And so that's essentially the recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions at this point from council members? Mr. Mayor or Councilmember Chateau? No?
The position in red, by the way, is a seasonal position. This is the bocce position that's maintenance. That person, it would be added seasonally to Public Works to assist us with seasonal park maintenance. And so that's why that position's in red. The color coding, the black and the blue reflect the bargaining group that each of the members is a part of. So the darker positions are mid-managers, executive staff, and the blue are St. Helena Employees Association staff.
It seems reasonable to break this down in different phases so I can allow public comment at this phase. If there is any public comment, now would be the time to make it. Or are you ready? Are you
Just
moving?
One more
Okay.
item, and that is this handout
Okay.
here describes, and the mayor doesn't have I don't know that the mayor has a chance to see this, but this is a chart of how the current fund distribution occurs for each of the positions between the general fund, the water fund, and the wastewater fund, or other, which in most cases is the garage fund. And so what we've done is rebalance the distribution to essentially, I think the change here is about an $8,000 impact to the general fund and about a $50,000 to $60,000 impact to the water and the wastewater fund. One goes up, one goes down. And so they're within a relatively safe margin of error, but it reflects our estimate of how they would be distributed. And this is something that we would look at on an annual basis to make sure that it continues to reflect the current allocation of resources.
Okay.
Right. So the mayor's question is this a chart that we have? And this is a handout at today's meeting, Mayor. And it breaks down, it distinguishes between the current allocation of staff time to these three funds and what that would look like under the reorganization.
Okay.
Councilmember
Is that something
Coberstein.
that can be emailed to me after the meeting?
Yes, we're going to
Yes.
email it to you right now.
Okay, thanks.
I just have one more question. Is the part-time bocce person then become a full-time city employee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any public comment at this time on this section of our discussion? We're going to, I would allow it for other sections if there's other comments later on, but it would be a time to just focus in on this part if you would like.
I'm Anthony McKelly. As you know, our parks need help. You all heard it last meeting about the skateboard park. My only question is to Mr. Prestwich is that if an employee, a present worker in the Parks and Rec Department moves up to that management position, will you then have his ex position as a position you're going to hire for? Because otherwise, you're not going to get another employee in that department.
Any other questions?
No,
I'm sure you'll, no, if you have others, we'll just jot them down.
When he said people would move up, I would hope whoever moves up, that position would become available, so we get another person in Parks and Rec. Otherwise, you're going to lose a position.
All right. We can comment on that, Mr. City
So
Manager.
the-
Tell us about that.
So the answer to that question is yes. If we do, the plan is to do an internal recruitment for the Public Works Operations Manager. And if there is, when that position is filled, we would recruit internally or externally for a replacement person that is put in that position. So we want to make sure that the organization is left whole.
So the important point to be made here is that we're looking at positions and time, full-time equivalents, and not necessarily individuals, although some individuals will move up in the chain of command, correct, with more responsibilities?
We anticipate that there will be promotional opportunities
Right.
within the organization, and we do find it valuable to grow our own talent.
All right. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Matt Demchuk, 1000 Brown Street. I'm also the chair of the Parks and Rec Commission, and I applaud
Welcome.
the city manager for finally getting this in front of you guys. It's been a long time coming. I'm happy to see the increase focused on the parks, which I think are in desperate need of maintenance. As you know, we've got a few projects in the pipeline for improvements at the park using the Park Impact Fund, and it's really hard to say we're going to spend all this money on these parks and not have the maintenance aspect of it in place. So I'm thrilled to see this happening. And the other thing is hopefully this will generate some additional accountability from the aspect of the staff to, reporting to the Parks and Rec Commission, because we volunteer our time to go visit all these parks and identify needs in the parks and to report those to the staff. And so hopefully with this new position that is being created, that individual can be fully accountable to the commission as well. So I support this 100%. Thanks.
Do you want to make a comment in terms of the accountability issue? I'm not sure. I mean, that may be a choice of words that I don't know if I necessarily agree with, but talk about the philosophy in terms of the interaction between staff and the commission and the city council.
Right. We're planning to cover that under the service level matrix next, but just in terms of that park superintendent, that is the position that I would anticipate serving as a liaison to the Parks Committee, to the Beautification Foundation. And so one of the objectives, again, is to relieve the Public Works Director, City Engineer, of a few extra night meetings that she's attending, and she's attending a lot right now.
Okay. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Bob Friscura, 1416 Sulphur Springs Avenue. I spent a lifetime working in the landscape field, and early in my career I worked for 5 different park departments, so I'm sympathetic to what they have to do and the manpower available. I'm going to read a brief statement about the proposal. I applaud and I commend the city manager and the public works director and their staffs for the time, the effort, and the thoughtfulness with which they studied and evaluated the functions and needs of the Public Works Department. And I thank them for their report and their recommendations. I support this plan, and I ask City Council to approve their recommendations. I'm especially appreciative of the reinstatement of the Parks, Trees, and Open Space Division. And in the recommendations section, I'm going to quote something that really appeals to me. This results in 4.5 workers dedicated to parks, trees, and open space. This is long overdue, as Matt has mentioned. I do have a question. I'd like to know what the difference between a superintendent is and a supervisor. I hope this superintendent will be able to participate in the activities that the workers do. He's not just a staff person that's in the office. So if we could clarify that at some time, I'd appreciate it. Again, I hope you'll approve this proposal. I think it's well done.
Thank you. Mark, you want to address that final question?
Sure. And so the answer is yes. The superintendents are not only supervisors, but also workers in the field. So transitioning to service level matrix, I want to first acknowledge and thank all of the Public Works field staff and really the entire department, because what you see on the walls here is a sample of all the work that they did to inventory every task, and we're probably still adding a couple as we come across them, but they spent an enormous amount of time getting organized and identifying essentially the current service level for each of these operations. So I can't read that from here, but is that parks? Is that parks? That's streets? Okay, so that's streets. That's an example of things that we do daily, weekly, quarterly, annually. When we there are some that we can't get to that we should be getting to, but this whole process has given us an opportunity to organize the entire department. And I think, and I want to invite our division managers and our public works maintenance manager to say a few words in a moment, but it's already resulted in some changes within the department that they'll touch on. This is the parks operations, and is that still parks here too? And so this is just a fraction of what's in this table. So this really represents all of the divisions and operations within the department. And from a performance measurement standpoint, what we've done is we've identified what we believe is the service level. The next step for us as a department is to document whether that's in fact the case. And we know that with some of the efficiencies, we may see opportunities to enhance levels of service over time. But we're going to need to test this out. And we're going to need to recalibrate. And we anticipate coming back to the council in 6 months to a year with that recalibration. And in addition to, from a performance measurement accountability standpoint and documenting this, the superintendents, with the assistance of the operations manager and the public works maintenance manager, are going to work on documenting the actual level of service that's occurring in the field. And our assumptions, we want to validate those. So we may assume that we're mowing weekly our parks, but what happens if there's a water main break that's happening once a month? If that's the average and we're being diverted, our service level is 3 times out of 4, not 4 out of 4 in a particular month. So we'll go through a process of documenting that. In addition to that, from a performance measurement standpoint, we also want to take a qualitative look at how well we're doing the job. And so you can anticipate down the road some form of outreach to the customer and a qualitative assessment of the work that's being performed. And I think what we'll find is that it will help us identify areas where we can do a better job, but it will also validate work that we're doing in the field and give us an opportunity to celebrate with our staff the work. And so at this time, let me invite a couple of these gentlemen represent today parks-related operations, street and building operations, and utility operations. And so if you could say a few words about the experience of this process.
Glad to. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenn Price. I'm the maintenance superintendent for the city of St. Helena here. And when we were asked to put this matrix together at the very beginning, it made sense, but we really were putting out fires everywhere, couldn't get a chance to really work on the matrix. So we finally had to just set it aside, sit down, and put it together for all the respective divisions. So for the street department, for instance, one over here, one of the things that was identified by management was that we have a real nifty tool at the courtyard. It's called the Tenant M20 sidewalk scrubber. And like, well, why haven't we been using this? Well, we haven't had a chance to get to it. So we got it out. We got new brushes on it and a new squeegee, and it's really neat how it works because it really puts down a detergent and it vacuums up everything out the back. The one setback is it makes the chewing gum on the street really shine. But other than that, it works great. So, I think the matrix was a great idea. It does help put everything into perspective, and it gives us the opportunity to put all of our tasks together for you guys to see. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Carlos. Sorry my voice sounds a little weird, but I've been post-nasal drip for a while. Sorry. Public Works Maintenance Manager. So as far as, again, preparing it for the parks, because we kind of did it all together, it did put everything in perspective, but it also kind of made us think about, well, what things have we lost in the shuffle or kind of taken for granted from also identifying new tasks like lights in the park last year. That was something new. and something as what we would call mundane as mowing the parks, right? That's probably our one recurring task that you'll see in all of our parks. Also will help us address everything, and then prioritize, and then put stuff in terms of timing. One thing we were talking with Glenn. So we look at the calendar year for the school, and we base some of our operations based on that, like painting. So painting the stops and the crossbars, or when we used to spray. Granted, everything's on there because we don't spray anymore. We would base our spraying based on when the students weren't there. Now we're going to be looking at other options. So that will be a working document. You'll be seeing us adding a whole hell of a lot more stuff and taking some of the stuff out. Already removed spraying because we don't do it anymore. So working document, again, put everything in perspective, and it's really good to kind of help us to prioritize stuff. Thank you.
And when he says spraying, he's referring to Roundup.
Hello, Clayton Church. I'm your water distribution chief. We gathered from the matrix. It was a chance for us to put everything together at once, find our efficiencies and our deficiencies, and then get better organized, get out there, and it actually freed up time, get out and do things like our city crossing edge control program. We hadn't had a lot of time to do that, and then after we worked on the matrix, we were able to put people in other places, up your efficiency, and work on new things. We're able to do a lot more leak checks, things like that, getting proactive instead of reactive. That's definitely what I think the utility department took from this matrix. Thank you.
So that concludes our overview of the matrix. We won't get into the details today, but we wanted you to see the work that was put into becoming more organized and thinking through our tasks.
I would invite any public comment before we move on. None? Oh, there's one. We're kind of taking it section by section. I know you came in a little late, but you're welcome to give your comment at this point.
Well, my comment, I'm Betsy Holzhauer, and my comment is in general. In the past, a lot of people who were doing the physical work were released, quit, fired, I don't know what. So there's been understaffed for quite a few years, and it shows, especially in the parks, and I'm sure other places. And I don't mean one park. Well, Crane Park is fine, but that's a whole different group. But the rest of them are in really poor shape, and there's lots of ways they could be fixed. However, how government works and how much they want community groups involved is something I don't know all that much about. But it is really unsafe for many things, and people with pets. The vet bills, the vets are loving it with all the foxtails and the dogs, $300, $400, $500 per surgery to get them out. And I don't know how Southbridge and the college put up with all that stuff, because when it's cut, it's just left there. And we pick it up and they say, oh, we'll pick it up. We bring in our own cans and fill them up, raking up the stuff, and it's still sitting there a month later. So a lot of things, and I'm sure you're addressing this, but a lot of it needs more people working. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next, the third section here is.
I just want to jump in quickly and just say thank you to the city manager and the public works staff for all the work going into this. I think it's going to be a really great tool. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. So now we're transitioning to a recommendation to move from monthly billing to every other month billing. And what's driving this is an interest in creating efficiencies for our staff. And in terms of, I sometimes, this has impacts on both finance and public works. And so we have staff today that we have about 45 to 60, I hope I'm not stealing the finance directors, we have about 45 to 60 customers each month that don't pay the bill on time, and what that does is it creates a situation where we have to visit each of their homes and door hang each house, and that in talking to our staff, that represents about 15 person hours per month that could be allocated to work, and so it will free up a lot of time to do that. It will also resolve a number of telephone calls and questions that arise at the finance department, and sometimes it's just a timing issue. And we think the bills themselves will also be easier to understand and produce. And we've identified some workarounds for people that are comfortable with a monthly payment process. And so I will turn it over at this point to our finance director.
Thank you very much. Is my mic on? There we go. My little light doesn't come on, it's broken. So as Mr. Presswich had said, that switching over to bi-monthly billing, it will improve staff capacity, primarily with the shut-off notices, as well as some of the additional phone calls finance gets. Reduce costs, going from 6 billings or 12 billings a year to 6 billings. My initial numbers is at least $10,000 just in printing costs alone, and mailing costs. Reduce customer complaints. Customer complaints are primarily due to the timing of the bills. On the next slide, you'll highlight that. And then also an important thing, the bi-monthly billing will have zero impact on customer costs. The overall costs are the same. It's just set up on every other month billing as opposed to monthly. So here's an overview of our current billing cycle. Real quickly, you'll see, and these are approximate dates just depending if it falls on a weekend or not. We typically read the meters the 8th of the month, and on the right-hand side, I provided a sample billing of the actual dates for the April 2019 billing. So we read the meters on April 8th. Our bills were generated on April 11th. The next billing cycle meter read was on May 8th. The next billing cycle's bills were generated on May 13th, but the bills due for the initial one on April 8th weren't due until May 15th. So the two areas that are circled, you can see that's where a lot of timing is. We get a lot of phone calls each month, a lot of confusion, and so just changing it to a bi-monthly billing cycle will help alleviate a lot of the confusion that we have. And then you'll see our late fees are assessed the day after the bills are due, so typically the 16th of the month. Door hangers are 2 weeks after the regular due date, and then shut-offs are 72 business hours after the door hanger. So that's what's currently happening. The next slide will show you our proposed billing cycles. So you'll see that the meter reads would be done, and this is our sample billing for March 2000 for 2020. So the meter read for that bill would be on March 9th, and that would be the billings for both January and February. The bills will be generated around March 11th. The bills will be due April 15th, so you still have the 30-day from the invoice date that the bills are due. Late fees would be assessed on April 16th. Door hangers would be on May 1st. Shut-offs would be 72 hours after door hanger. Because of a weekend, it would actually be on May 7th. And then the next billing cycle would be done on May 8th. So that avoids the crossover, the two different billing cycles changing over to a bi-monthly billing. The proposed billing cycle, and this information is in the staff report, is that we would have one partial bill. So December 9th to December 31st, we would actually issue that bill on January 11th, and it would be due on February 10th. That would just be for a partial billing to accommodate for the every other month billing. After that, the issue date of the bill would essentially be every odd month, and then the due date of the bill would be every even month. So or every other even month and every other odd month. The proposed transition, it will take a lot of work to do this. In the past, the city was on bi-monthly billing, changed to monthly billing, and now we're proposing to change it back. The first thing that would happen is we would have to have an ordinance change. That would take place in anticipated September and October because of first reading and second readings. We would do as much outreach as we can. Obviously, build monthly inserts in the bills. The plan changes would go in every bill until the actual change happened. We'd also use a communications checklist that Mr. Presswich and Jessica DeKine actually just came up with. And so we'd utilize as much as we can from announcing at council meetings, the Shine articles, various sources. The last full monthly bill would be December 13th, and that would be the bill from November 9th to December 8th. The last partial bill would be January 10th, and that would be the bills from December 9th to December 31st. And then the other thing that we would do in this proposed billing cycle, as Mr. Presswich had mentioned, is a level pay plan. And what we would do is we can offer this through February 1st, 2020, because that would give us enough time for us to set it up in our system before the first full billing cycle. And that would offer a one-time opt-in level pay plan. And what this is, it's an auto payment done on a monthly basis, and it's based on averages from the previous years, calculated every 6 months. So the next slide describes a little bit more about the level pay plan. Again, it's offered as a one-time opt-in program, so it's not something we'll automatically offer. You actually have to come to the city and sign up for it. Part of our outreach is we will include applications in the billing cycles. What this would be is a monthly auto payment, so it's not something that you would come in and pay. We'd automatically charge it through your credit card, through your bank account. How it's figured is the monthly amount is the average of the same 6-month period during the previous year, plus a 5% for rate increases and fluctuations. So for instance, we would take your bills from January to June, total them up, divide them by 6. That's where you get your average monthly bill plus a 5% to be able to account for those fluctuations. At the end of the 6th month, we'll do a true billing calculated. And so what we'll do is we'll take what the actual bills were for that January to June time frame. At the end of that 6 months, we'll take whatever the difference is, whether it's the customer owes us or we owe the customer. We will take that into account in the next 6-month billing cycle. So let's say if we have undercharged the customer $50, for the next 6-month period, we'll take July through December of the previous year. We'll look at that, we'll take the average, and then we'll add, if they owe us $50, we'll add it on to that, and then we'll divide it by 6 months. So that will give us a flat billing for that 6-month period. Or if we owe them money, we'll deduct it from it, and then we'll divide it by 6 months. So as complicated as it sounds, we do have a formula to do it, and essentially the customers will have the exact same monthly bill for 6 months and then for the second 6 months. And that's it for the bi-monthly transition of utility billing.
Questions or comments from City Council? Mayor?
I think that's excellent. Thank you.
I'm curious about just one thing. Do you have to do the door hanging instead of a phone call?
There are changes in regulations that I believe they go into effect in January 1st, 2020. I'll have to relook at them again, where we are going to have to make more of an effort before the door hangers. So we still will do the door hangers, and we'll also try to do phone calls as well as the emails that are on the system. So over the past year and a half, we've been trying to update annually, just asking for more customer information, so we have that ahead of time.
Okay.
Councilmember Koberstein.
I have a question about the CARE program. The people on that program, how is this going to affect them? Or, how are you going to set up to deal with that separate program?
The CARE program will work the same as if it's a single-family residence and they qualify for CARE, they will still receive half off the base fee, so there is no difference in that. The CARE program for the multifamily, the mobile home parks, and if I believe it's just a mobile home park that's on at Vineyard Valley right now, that would work the same as well. We'll do the reimbursement. What we can do is we can definitely we will have to look at revising that policy. Maybe we do the reimbursement on a monthly basis as opposed to changing over to bi-monthly. So it's definitely something we will have to address.
The idea would be they wouldn't have probably the level payment option. They would just all move to the bi-monthly to make it easier for you to administer? Or?
That is correct. I did not think about that because the mobile home park actually pays their bills for them. I can talk to the mobile home park, their management, and let them know what the proposed is.
Sure.
So on the level pay plan, in order for somebody to opt in, it would be a phone call or an email to City Hall?
It is actually an application they would fill out, and what we will do is we will include the applications in the monthly billing cycles up until that point, and we'll try to do as much outreach as possible to reach as many customers to see if they would like to opt in for that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It does make sense. I think we probably, I don't know if we complain, but it is a weird bill when you have a situation where a bill is generated before the prior bill is due. Yeah, that does lead to confusion. And I hear that from my lovely wife quite often. She pays the home bills. And so I don't, go take it up with City Hall. Don't talk to me about it. No. But now I recognize how that must be pretty common, correct? And I would not call that confusion on the part of the public. I would call that probably a legitimate sort of concern, like this doesn't really make sense. So I think that spreading it over 2 months makes sense. I think you mentioned this, but I want to drive the point home. So if somebody opts in and there's what I'd call a true up at the end of that 6 months, say they're short $50 or $75, that $50 or $75 is then spread out over the next 6 months, right? It's not a lump sum due. And I think you addressed it, but I want to clarify that,
That
correct?
is correct.
Okay, so that's important. I guess philosophically, I assume that the staff's thinking is that when a bill is paid over 2 months, there may be some people who have a little sticker shock, that maybe are used to paying their bills on a monthly basis. They get down to, okay, do I have enough money to survive? And that they can opt in so that they're used to paying something every month. Is that sort of the thinking? That for some people, I'd rather just pay it every 30 days to know that I've got at least something covered, rather than having that bill build up over a 2-month period. Would that be consistent with what the thinking is by staff?
Yes, and I think that perhaps the original monthly billing was inspired, the decision from every other month to monthly may have been inspired by sticker shock. And so we wanted to think through how we could offer the continuation of monthly payments, but remove ourselves from the invoicing process. And so this true-up auto payment will be a solution that also probably reduces the number of situations where we have to follow up on late fees because the bill will be paid.
Okay. Any comments from members of the public at this point?
My question is the amount of time, payroll time that's used for putting out door hangers, making phone calls to people who don't pay. How does that compare to after, say, a given period of time, whatever is felt appropriate, and that's it, your water's cut off. Forget the hangers, forget 12 phone calls, because that takes personnel time that could be used so well in other ways. I don't know if that's something, to take up so much time of employees for people who just don't get it done, their job done. And maybe if they didn't have water more frequently, they'd make more of an effort. I don't know.
Any comments on that?
So our interest is in, we want to get out of the late fee business and the shut-off business. Truly, we don't need to be in that business at all. And this recommendation will reduce by at least 50% the number of issues that we deal with, and probably more.
Mr. McKelly?
Thank you. Anthony McKelly. I'm a little confused. You want to go to a 2-month billing cycle, but yet you're going to let people opt out and go to a 1-month billing cycle? Isn't that going to be a little confusing? I mean, what are you gaining then? Now, I know I have some friends that are very elderly that are on the assistance program. I know they're going to have to be on the 1-month billing cycle because they live on their Social Security check. They won't be able to go for 2 months. And I hope you reach out to them and not just Vineyard Valley, because they're the ones that are really going to be hurt. So I'm just puzzled. To me, you should do one or the other. But if you're going to let people opt in, opt out, isn't that just going to create more time for staff?
Mr. Presswich.
So this is a one-time opt-in, and so over time, people will eventually transition to an every other month billing posture. And the auto payment process associated with a monthly bill should reduce the number of situations where we have a late fee situation and need to follow up in the field. Today, we're spending about 15 hours a month chasing down bills that are more than 60 days. More than 30 days delinquent. And so we anticipate a lot of savings, which is another reason why I say we will want to come back and recalibrate service levels, because we're going to have a void of hours that can then be applied to services in the field directly for the customer.
And just as another point of clarification too, it's billing versus payment. We will do every other month billing. However, the level pay plan, they'll do payments every month. So we don't physically do the physical billing, but we allow them to do payments every month based on an established rate. And that's all automatic.
Councilmember Koberstein. I saw your light on.
I hope we can have another discussion about the CARE program in general, but maybe to deal with the issue that was raised, we could start off by giving them credit for 2 months, on the first bill, so they'd sort of be ahead of the game and be able to plan, accordingly.
Mayor Ellsworth, any comments, questions?
I concur with that, and with what Mr. McKelly said, there are some vulnerable folks out there. We want to make sure that they understand how this works, so that they can pay every month. And then I think, as Ms. Koberstein said, making sure people are ahead of the game rather than behind it. So whatever we need to do to have those conversations, I'm in support of.
Councilmember Chateau, any comments or questions? Okay.
So just
move forward. Or?
Sure, and just to wrap up this third item, we wanted a long runway for implementation, so we have about 5 months before this would take effect, with direction today, and that the intent there is to make sure we take the time to make sure people are aware, we walk people through the process, and we have time to implement.
What are the trends in other cities with respect to mailing in payments versus auto pay? Are municipalities attempting to encourage automatic payment, or do you know?
In speaking with other finance directors, we always like to encourage auto pay because it is a lot less time consuming for staff, and then also it ensures that there's automatically a system that's set up to be able to pay. Percentage wise, I don't know what the percentages are for what's on cash, what's on check, what's on auto pay. I know whenever we have people that come in or make payments, we always encourage auto pay, and Martine does a really good job of being on the phone with people, actually walking them through how to do it. So we do try to encourage that because that is the most efficient way to take care of your utility bill.
It seems like it would be efficient. Kara and I are old school. We like to hold on to our money until the last minute to get that 0.125% interest from our bank. So I can see both sides. Efficiency-wise, I can imagine that auto pay would be great if it was fully auto pay, but I don't think we'll ever get to that because a lot of people just don't have that set up necessarily. But it would be interesting to see how. I wonder if other municipalities have done a sort of a PR program to try to encourage that or not.
So our final recommendation relates to adjusting our purchasing policy limits, and I'll turn it over to our finance director.
Oops, let me get to the right slide here. So here's our recommendation. There's a lot of background information inside the staff report. Currently, we have a two-step process for purchase orders. So we have what we call a purchase order requisition. That is what's filled out by the departments, and then they submit it to the finance department. Our current policy is any purchase between $500 and $1,500 requires a requisition to be filled out, and it also requires an attempt to get 3 written or oral bids or quotes. And then above that, anything above $1,500, we actually turn that purchase order requisition into a physical purchase order. So that's what we currently do. What's in front of you is what we're actually recommending, and it also shows the amount that we process. And I took our calendar year 18 since that was our last full calendar year that we did. So checks between $500 and $1,500, we actually processed 280. We processed 288 purchase order requisitions. Purchase orders between $501 and $2,500, so this actually included the requisitions is 208. Purchase orders between 2501 and 5,000, we did 8 of them. And purchase orders over 5,000, we did 41 of them in that last calendar year. What staff is proposing is eliminating the requirement to do the purchase order requisition for any purchase or for any purchases under $1,500. That would save a lot of time and energy as far as filling out the requisition form, keeping track of it, giving it to finance when the invoice comes in, and then also increasing the PO threshold from 1,500 up to 5,000. What that would do, there's a lot of staff time involved in just processing the purchase order, getting the verbal or the written quotes. The current process right now, if a purchase order is actually enacted, let's say Public Works needs to purchase something, it's $2,500. They have to request their 3 quotes. So a lot of times they're waiting 1 to 2 days before they can actually get those quotes back to them. Once they get the quotes, they submit it to finance. We process purchase orders once a week unless it's an emergency situation. Public Works cannot make that purchase until that purchase order is physically turned around and they actually have it in their hands. So what we're looking at doing is trying to eliminate some of the unnecessary paperwork. Since 2001, we've only increased these limits once, and that was in 2016. And even at that time, we didn't increase it to a maximum level. Primarily due at that time because we were still dealing with flood control project. We were trying to get our bearings straight on, getting our purchasing policies set and established. So we did not want to make the recommendation to increase it too much. We do feel that the $5,000 limit would be adequate for any purchase orders, to be able to issue purchase orders and require the 3 quotes. Oh, sorry, I guess this was my only slide on that one. My apologies for that. So the percent reduction, if the purchase orders, if we only require them over $2,500, it would actually reduce our workload about 81%. If we change it to only issuing purchase orders over 5,000, it would reduce the purchase order the purchase order workload reduction to 80. It would reduce it by 84%. So it'd be considerable time for Public Works, for finance, and then for any other departments that do purchase order requisitions. Primarily Public Works because they do purchase the most amount of supplies and equipment that happens within the city. Comparing to other cities around us, comparable size, comparable budgets, 5,000 is an acceptable level, and that also would account for any, increased cost of goods since 2001 that we didn't accommodate for before.
And I would add that in talking to our Public Works supervisors, they have many good stories to tell you, and this is not a 20 or 30 minute a day savings. This is hours upon hours of time savings. And so just in talking to them about this, I know that sometimes they'll spend an entire day on paperwork, and we'll be able to eliminate that with these changes.
Initial questions, comments from council? Mayor?
I'm just looking over this now. Sorry, it went down on my screen. I'm just bringing it back up. So there's a precedent from other cities our size that shows that this is a workable model to make these changes.
That is correct. As part of the packet, the city council packet, there was an attachment that does give a comparison between St. Helena, Calistoga, Yountville, American Canyon, Healdsburg, Sonoma, and Sebastopol.
Okay, I'm looking at that now. So towns like Sebastopol, Yountville, our size, theirs is up to 5,000, I'm seeing. Okay. American Canyon, 5,000.
That is correct. So Sebastopol's 5,000, Sonoma's 5,000. Healdsburg was up to 1,000 by the supervisor, so theirs was a little lower than ours. American Canyon was 5, Yountville is 5, and then Calistoga did have a range between 1 and 10,000, so theirs was a little harder to read.
Okay. Oh, I see right there. I see what you're saying.
Walk us through an example of, say, something $4,500. If we push the threshold up to that amount, what would that person who wants to purchase something for $4,500 have to do? Or say 5,000, the max, under the 5,000 scenario. What would happen under the existing and then under the proposed?
Yeah. So under the existing, if it's anything under the 5,000 mark, what they would have to do is they'd have to get 3 written bids or quotes for those items. So they'd physically have to contact three different entities. And then typically what will happen is one will respond right away. A day or two later, they might have to call the other two. So sometimes there are several days of follow-up with them. We do get to a point, if somebody's non-responsive, that we do have the staff write a memo and attach it to the purchase order requisition. So once they've gotten their 3 quotes, let's say it's a 1 to 2 day, sometimes 3-day lead time, especially if it's over a weekend. Once they get their 3 quotes, they fill out the purchase order requisition. On the back of the purchase order requisition, they have to include all 3 written quotes that they've received for that. They sign it, they give it to their supervisor for them to sign. Then it comes to the finance department. And what we do is we process purchase orders 1 day a week unless it's an emergency situation. So our accounts payable person, what she does is she reviews all the documentation. If everything looks okay, if it doesn't look okay, then she kicks it back to the department and we need follow up on it. If everything's okay, she will give it to me for approval. I will review it. Occasionally we miss things, so sometimes we still kick them back at that point. Once I've reviewed it, we approve it, and then the purchase order is generated. It's given back to the department. At that point, the department can make the purchase. So it is a very labor intensive on both ends. Changing this, increasing the PO limit to 5,000, what we would do is they're authorized to make the purchase as long as it is a budgeted item. It has to be within their budget, and they have to have authorization to do it and get a verbal okay from their supervisor. They make the purchase, the invoice is sent to us, they code it, and we pay it.
If I may, an example would be a pump goes down and we need to get a replacement part and it's going to be under $5,000. We got to get 3 quotes to go to, when we have a local pump company just down the road that we can just easily drive through, we're having to get 3 quotes, wait for them, knowing that the other ones won't respond as quickly. So we're waiting for that day or a week, and then we got to wait to process it. And then say April, please, is another emergency. We have quite a bit of that in Public Works: generators, pump, rentals. Pace pipe supply as one of our regular vendors. We have to get all these quotes to know that who's going to be the lowest price. We still got to have all this backup information. I don't see, unless it's emergency, that we wouldn't still try to get 3 quotes just to make sure we're still in the market. But it's just a good example is just like a leak repair. Having to get parts for a hydrant failing. It's just there's a lot of lot of good examples out there for this threshold between anything above $500.
And to add on to that, what we have found with several of the vendors, our crews in the field typically know which vendor is going to be lowest. It's always good to do a check occasionally, but Pace is a big supplier of us, so every time they get 3 quotes, they'll contact Pace, they'll contact 2 others. The other 2 vendors are used to us going to them, requesting a quote and saying, oh yeah, sorry, you're not the lowest. So at some point they do stop responding to us. So if we actually increase that threshold, and it is a good idea to occasionally still check up on it, but maybe not do it once or twice a week for different items that they have to order.
I want to invite our supervisors to offer any comments they have on this.
So just recently replacing one of our mowers. Another example, Bell Corp, who's our normal supplier, they have 3 or 4 stores in their area that are reasonably for us to go pick it up or even for delivery. So contacted 3 of them. Only one of them came back with which was the one from Santa Rosa. Contacted the one in Calistoga. Again, you figure the price difference isn't going to vary too much because it's the same organization. The next closest location was in Dixon. They actually no, they didn't give me a quote. Lowe's was the next one. And again, logistically at that point, you're like, well, the nearest Lowe's is in Vallejo. I'm going to go here. But again, that took a whole, let's see, I did that on a Wednesday. I didn't get an answer till the following Monday, I think, or Tuesday. And even then, you're contacting vendors for a follow-up and no response. So like April said, we're writing a letter of justification saying, look, on such and such date, this time I contacted, no response. So that was just the most recent one where we went through. And at this point, we only have 1 mower. Our smaller mower to do our smaller parks, we're having to push mow. So,
thank you. Councilmember.
Could you explain to me what it means that the item is budgeted? I mean, we have a lot of stuff that, special equipment that we know you're going to want to purchase, and some of that may be subject to the bidding process. I don't know, but paper clips, motor oil, I mean, what does it mean exactly that it's budgeted?
It means that the department, the item that they're going to be purchasing, it's already approved in the regular budget, so it's not going above and beyond what's already in the approved and adopted budget.
When I look at like a line item that says supplies or something like that, that's
Or so under like an operations budget, probably like government buildings, might have other contract services and or miscellaneous repairs on the system. And like parks usually has a bunch of line items. That's kind of like this is what we think we're going to use it for, but then we get a priority. Hey, we need mulch at this park instead of this park. We're going to use those funds in that pool of funds. We can't just, start a PO without having we know we have money funds available. Or similar with the CIP project, if we need some minor equipment that we're going to do internally, like the Lyman Park, we'll do the purchase and bill to that CIP project.
We're still responsible for balancing our budget, and we can't spend money that you haven't appropriated.
right. I think that's kind of the safeguard in this. You might be thinking, oh, people are going to go crazy, but you have to live within the limits of the money that's been appropriated.
Correct.
And the same requirements for mandatory written bids or quotes would still apply for anything over that 5,000 threshold. It's just anything below that, which is a lot of the day-to-day operations.
Okay, I'll open it. Well,
And sorry to jump in.
Go ahead.
We come up for our quarterly budget review, that's where we make sure that everything's staying within the limit. We have that oversight capacity.
That is correct.
Okay.
any public comment on this phase of our discussion? None. Okay. Take us to the next step.
So that completes our presentation on the 4 different areas, and we want to pause and answer any additional questions you have, and then we're seeking your direction on how to move forward.
Any council concerns or comments regarding anything that's been discussed today?
No, it sounds good to me.
Mayor Ellsworth, any comments, questions, or concerns that you might have?
I'm comfortable moving forward with the recommendations. I feel like they've been vetted pretty well. Seeing precedent from other cities where these operations work helps me too. And that, we have some oversight abilities. So I'm comfortable, moving forward with the recommendations.
Okay. Councilmember Koberstein.
I agree.
Okay. So you have this broken up in a couple of different recommended actions. I'm not sure which part of this needs a motion and what part needs a direction. You have 1, 2, and 3. Do we need a separate motion for the first recommended action?
Yes.
And the other ones, we kind of already have direction. Well, you don't quite have it, but we'll work through that. Would it be a good time to make a motion from a council member on item number 1?
I'll move approval of the resolution that's attached to the report as attachment 4, which deals with the Public Works reorganization.
I second.
I will second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Koberstein, actually a second by Councilmember Chateau, Jeff. Roll call.
Councilmember Koberstein.
Yes.
Chateau.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Now, what direction, what do you want to focus in on with respect to the other remaining 2 items?
So with respect to the bi-monthly utility billing, just a green light to proceed with planning to unveil that. So that would mean we would bring back an ordinance in the September-October timeframe. We would begin public information and education about the transition. We would work on the CARES program and figure out how to integrate that into the 2 different options, the monthly auto pay approach as well as the every other month billing approach.
From what I can hear, what I've heard so far, it looks like you have that direction. Is that the case, Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes, it is with me, yes.
Council members?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that enough direction for you?
Yes.
Okay, and then the third phase of our discussion?
Third relates to the increase in the purchase order limits. So this would require some municipal code changes that we would bring back to you. The policy question for the council is, would you set that at 2,500, at 5,000, or some other number? I am recommending 5,000.
I'm comfortable with 5,000.
I am too.
I think the only discomfort I have is, I could be moved along on this. I need a little bit more information, I think. It just seems to make sense if you're around 5,000 to at least call a couple people, even though you may not go through a full-blown process. I don't know how much it takes to at least make a phone call to a couple people, and have a timeline or something that drives the price down in some way, even in an informal way, right? I'm going to make a few phone calls as opposed to written quotes, something that says, okay, if it's around 5,000 and it could be 4,200, 4,600, or 5,000, I don't know. How much time does it take to make a few phone calls? That would be the only part that I would like to retain, and that would be up to the staff to do that, right? I mean, no one's going to really know that because it wouldn't be written, but it would be a nice thing to have. Maybe you can address that. Maybe that's not efficient, or that is efficient. I don't know.
I think my concern is just the paperwork and the process that requires so much time documenting these telephone calls or non-answered telephone calls. They don't get back to us. I think we're trying to create as much staff time for real work and service to the community, and not as much on the paperwork that documents the fact that we made phone calls. But I think that we can still make the phone calls, and it would be our business practice to work with our supervisors to know that there's an expectation that when we're in the $25,000 to $5,000 range that we're going to make some phone calls. We don't necessarily have to document it at all, but we want to make sure that we hold the vendors accountable and that we're trying to achieve the best possible price.
Is there a way to memorialize that aspect of it without it becoming too troublesome, paperwork heavy? Just so that if it's not a policy and it's a practice, that we're noting the practice?
We could include it in the municipal code where it states any purchases between 2,500 and 5,000 that there's an attempt to obtain 3 oral or written quotes. So we can easily add that language in there where it doesn't require that a purchase order is actually processed, but it is written in there saying that they must make an attempt to obtain those quotes. That's easy to write in.
Mr. Doring, does that sound like a mechanism?
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the practice. And I think you have to leave it to the discretion of the item and the experience and history of what folks are doing, what they're ordering. The folks in the field know whether a phone call is going to be returned or not, or the timing of it. But I think it's a best practice to try to achieve. I don't think we have to be taskmasters and have it accounted for. But if you can save a few $100 on something, in that range, I'm talking about between 25 and 5,000. I think that would be a good practice to at least have as a policy. So yeah, I'm yes, Mayor Ellsworth, I am in favor of that, having a written practice at least.
Okay.
Councilmember Koberstein disagrees. No, go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at this chart, and we had 8 occasions over the year where we had something between $2,500, $1, and $5,000. That's not a lot of occasions. I would leave it to the discretion of the person who's placing the order. I wouldn't necessarily put it in writing as part of our policy or something. I think they would tend to know where they might be able to go to get the best price, and maybe that's the first place they call. But yeah.
2 of us want it written in practice. What say you, Councilmember Chateau?
I say I'm aligned with Mary.
Okay. All right. Well, then we don't have to have a written practice, apparently, on a 2 to 2. I think, is that enough direction for you? Or, we don't have a third council member, so we don't know.
I
So
think
we'll
it
just
is,
leave
and
it for another day on that issue.
And when we bring this back to you, you have flexibility to make adjustments later.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us what kind of things fell in that category of 8 articles last year. That might help.
Okay.
May I also add that there are thresholds that employees just can't sign off. They have to get their department heads to sign off on thresholds. So it's not like anyone in the city can sign off on anything up to $5,000. I don't know if that's been clarified here. So typically right now, the department head just assigns the amount, a threshold that a supervisor may have. I don't know how the other departments are. I just know in our department, only the managers have assigning authority, usually between $1,500 to $5,000, depending on their level. And department head signs off on everything else. I tell you, I'm not going to sign off on anything unless I have some good circumstances to sign off on anything up to 5,000. So maybe that's one of the avenues that we look into.
There was a little discussion that followed this last item. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment from the public, given the direction of the conversation. No, there is none. Mr. President.
I'd like to just take a moment to thank a number of different staff people because there was a lot of work that went into this. Our HR department is here, and they're a part of the conversations that got started. And I think Kathy was the original author of our staff report dating back many months. But there was a lot of work on Kathy's part. There was work with our bargaining groups, and I appreciate that. Our city clerk's office adjusts very quickly to changing venues and requests for large format printing jobs. And so I want to acknowledge the city clerk's office, more than one person, for jumping quickly to assist. And of course, our public works staff has done an amazing job of putting together really a work plan that will provide continuity for our organization moving forward. And I really think a platform for how we look to improve our service levels in the community. So we look forward to bringing you the ordinances that you will consider formally, and then we also look forward to you bringing you some information about our service levels over time and another workshop at some point in the future when we're ready to talk about recalibrating certain things.
Well, thank you for making those comments. I agree with you, and I'd like to remind our council and our community what our vision statement is for our city. The city of St. Helena will strive to be economically sustainable and continue to be a family-friendly, diverse, and safe community which prudently manages its financial and human resources, continues to upkeep and improve its infrastructure, ensures its water security, provides a full range of housing, business, cultural, and recreational opportunities, and embraces and retains its historic small-town character, beautiful natural environment, and high quality of life. And so I think much of what is stated there is going to be accomplished through this change and these different policies. I do commend everybody for getting together and working through this. It was multi-departmental. There's no question about it. Sometimes council doesn't see all the work, but I commend you all for bringing this forward. On that note, this meeting is adjourned until, August 13th, 6 o'clock.
Thank you all. That was wonderful work.